about specific economics, I've done a little bit of research into the franchise industry, and it's really hard to get specific numbers as far as income. But what I have seen is that the margins are maybe not so good, especially in some of the food areas. I don't know if you guys are comfortable sharing like some ranges of revenues and margins that you're seeing, after the royalties, after your advertising co-op.
Sure. I'll take that one if you don't mind. So our average restaurant does $2.7 million. It brings about 18% in store cash flow to the bottom line. We run about 4% overhead, so it's sort of a net margin of 14%. That compares with a total development cost of about $1.6 million. Of that, you can borrow 1.3. So it's about a $300,000 equity investment. The debt service on 1.3 is about $100,000 a year. The cash flow coming off the restaurant is about $500,000 a year. So it's literally about $400,000 a year on a $300,000 investment.
And what's the standard deviation in stores? Is it variable or is it
It is. I don't remember enough about stats to answer that the way I do. Something to do with an R squared or something. But the range, so in our 87 units, the lowest volume unit breaks even at about $23,000 a week. Our highest volume unit does almost $100,000 a week. So it's a great variation. But I would say the vast majority are in a tight band between 45 and 55. So that when I build a new unit, I actually have great comfort that our sales prediction is going to be very close. And we've never really been wrong. Applebee's and many concepts have tremendous demographic and competitive analysis tools that help you predict sales volumes too.
So Applebee's actually has tools to help you in kind of basically your site selection and forecast.
Well, and people too. So we find a site, and I like it, but then I have to submit it to them. They summon someone out to see it.
Okay.
It goes to committee. They have to approve it. They turn down sites all the time.
Okay.
After hearing those numbers, I realized I'm in the wrong business.
The smaller, I think some of us may be interested in some, may not be able to afford 87 stores right away. So, I mean, they may be interested to hear like maybe a range if you guys are comfortable sharing.
I can't share the specifics. Here's where the man sort of talks. But in a service business, as most service, I mean, there's a lot of, actually, we have fairly high margins. Once you've got to pay for rent. I mean, we're talking about how much we use the building. That's always one of the key issues. You've got rent, and you've got your fixed managers there. At that point, we're tutoring 3 kids, and they're paying us $44 an hour, and we're paying a teacher $12 an hour. So each marginal child we get. So once you get above your break even, and that's the nut, then it's very, very lucrative. But
yeah, I mean, I did a lot of. Sort of post-fact, I've looked at sort of the performance of various kind of franchises. Something as small as like what are they, Wenzel's Pretzels or something, all the way up to more traditional fast food franchise like a Burger King. And I mean, what you'll see is these guys are going to do sales anywhere between $400K to $1.5 million, sort of on average. I mean, you'll have superstar stores that do really well. And from what I can tell, the margins, the operating margins are typically, the net margins are going to be somewhere, if you run it well, the 20, 25%. So I think the key, as I said earlier, is building a portfolio of these businesses, right? Because you just, not that they're necessarily economies of scale across the stores, but I think they're economies of financing scale, right? I mean, as far as being able to lend money, and I think about my store right now. I'm basically, for the equity I plowed into my first store, I'm seeing returns of an excess of 150%, which exceeds what I can get in the stock market these days, right? So, take advantage of the capital markets to really get into this. But the challenge really is getting a bank to lend you that money, right? Because I mean, if I were to go up to a bank and say, I mean, there's another sort of concept I'm trying to roll out, but I want to open up like 15 of these things, and it's challenging, right? Because I don't have the portfolio at this point to be able to make it a no-brainer decision. So I mean, there's a lot of salesmanship that goes on to get that off the ground.
Yes.
So this kind of ties into the earlier question, which is how do we, coming out of school, convince a bank to give us a dime when it comes to franchising? You guys all had some experience, pretty extensive experience. Even if it wasn't directly related to franchising, you had sort of a experience based on your resume that they could go to and see, senior level manager.
There's a very easy answer to that. Buy something that has a track record, right? Banks will loan against businesses with track record and proven cash flow. And that's why when you say, well, we can't start out this way, I think it's perfect. I think the best opportunity in franchising is to find a group of 5 units, 10 units, buy it. And you can borrow 70%, and you can raise from friends and family the balance, and pay them back with a good return, and then you're in business, in scale. And there are many, many maturing franchisees. They got into the good systems, in the 70s and 80s, and they're retiring, and they're going to sell.
And for existing businesses, a lot of sellers will actually extend financing to you as well, right? And so, and it's great for them because they can use the underlying business as a collateral. And so basically, you just have to throw off, carve out some chunk of your cash flow to them to service the debt and then pay it off that way. So for existing franchise, that's a very common approach. And then if you want to do something from scratch, the SBA is also available. And that's another sort of advantage of a franchise is that because it's a proven concept and there's typically a system-wide set of data for them to get comfortable around. I have seen SBA extend loans for brand new stores if you do a new franchise that has a pretty sort of predictable cash flow. And unfortunately, the SBA has lowered their limits this year. I think it's down to $700,000. It used to be at $1.3 million, but still, it's definitely enough to get started on your first one. And then basically, there's a multiplier effect. Basically plan on building out a couple more per year every year for the next 10 years, and then you'll be like this guy right here.
So would a Cold Stone be like, $1 million to start?
No. I mean, but there's a difference between what you need to show to get started and what it actually costs to build out. So, I mean, in this area, it's probably going to run you about $350 to do the initial build out of a store. But if you're smart about it, you can do that with zero of your own money, right?
Is there a fee you pay to get in with Cold Stone?
Oh, yeah, I mean, we could actually walk through offline all of the steps, but yeah, you typically are paying a franchise fee up front, but then
it's $35,000 in Applebee's. Well, what is it in Cold Stone? This is public
for your first one is $35, and then as you build out more, there's a sliding scale. But then the rest of those costs you don't incur. It depends on what sort of arrangement you have with the tenant of your space as well as your general contractor, right? But they're going to typically demand 50% up front, and then then you buy all the equipment sort of later on in the development process. But you got to line up the money up front, otherwise no one's going to build anything for you.
Yes.
Question. So you enjoy this thing so much, and you're back at work, like punching the clock, working for the man. What was it that made you not want to go open up like a completely different franchise, or maybe go do something completely different other than the Cold Stone? If you were happy with what you were doing, I'm just curious. And also, does your new job know?
Well, I think some of them are here today, so. No, but I don't think what you describe is mutually exclusive. So the fact of the matter is, and I've made no secret about it, there are other projects that I'm pursuing. I think from where I am right now, having basically plowed my own money into the first one, and now levering myself as much as I can to build out my next two, short of actually going out there and raising a syndicate, which I've considered doing. There's not much more I can do in parallel, right? And so. Which is not to suggest that when I'm done with my build-outs of additional stores that I'm going to quit my job and focus on that. But what I've learned is there's no shortage of people out there who want to get in on the ground floor, right? And so you can actually find people to work with you, and basically you can lever these people to help you either build out additional stores or pursue entirely new concepts. So. You can do both. And so the reality is, the only reason I'm working right now is I really needed something to keep me, challenged and stimulated. And so I needed to go to a place where I felt like I could get that and have fun at the same time. But good question.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm kind of curious. The question was asked earlier about sort of getting clients to get started. But during the talk, Greg, you mentioned that Applebee's in particular likes owner-operators that have a scale of units sort of more bigger businesses. And that's sort of a trend, I guess, is concerning me. I'm a little bit familiar with the McDonald's franchise, and I've heard you need about 5 minutes to get started. So I'm wondering, how do you convince the franchisors, to people like us, to go ahead and make that out? And maybe what's a minimal personal amount of capital we may need to get started, and a minimal scale we may need in one of these franchises to get going at a decent level where we can operate and be accepted?
I think it varies. You have to show liquid assets, technically of $500,000 to qualify as an Applebee's franchisee. In reality, there are no markets left. I mean, for all the big concepts, you can't sign up and just start looking for a location. And the younger concepts, you can. But I mean, you have to understand there's a night and day risk difference between Cold Stone and McDonald's at this point. So I don't know if there's really a good answer to that. In Cold Stone, what did you have to show? I mean, they all have them, and they publish them. This is all public, domain.
I don't know if there's a threshold I need to show, but I mean, I had the cash to do it, so it wasn't an issue.
Most of the there's something called the Uniform Franchise Offering Circular, UFOC, and this is regulated offering, right? So they must state what the minimum liquid, requirement you have to show. They have to state what the royalty is and what the whole deal is up front. And you can get these things probably just off the web.
And I think it's also important to understand that restaurants aren't the only franchise industry. And you talked about curves earlier, just as an example of the exact opposite end of the spectrum. It's been a huge growth pattern, but it costs $20,000. It costs less than $40,000 all in, including the build-out, to open a Curves as a franchisee. And Curves actually is not. It's pretty much done in the U.S. They've got 6,000 units in 8 years, but $40,000 to get in, and a typical Curves, back to your question about numbers, will do somewhere between 150 and 200,000 top line, so it's not as big a business as you guys have, and it'll throw off 50 to 60,000 in cash flow. I mean, that's a great investment. It's also riding a big wave right now.
Are you involved with Curves at all?
What's that?
Are you involved with Curves at all?
We're looking at that into the franchise world.
We had actually called them to see if they'd send somebody, and unfortunately they couldn't, because I thought it'd be an interesting one, particularly given the increasing interest I see of the students in fitness.
Yeah, it's just that there is a complete other end. The service end of the franchise world tends not to be as expensive as the food and lodging end.
Yeah.
Related to that, I mean, I looked at things as mundane as, and this is post-Cold Stone, but as mundane as coin-op laundromats, right? And those things are cash cows, right? I mean,
Totally.
you just find the right look. Unfortunately, the market's reasonably saturated, but each one of those things is just going to throw off $50,000, $60,000 pure cash, right? And all you really need to do is, at the end of every night, go in there with your bucket or your barrel and wheel out the money, right? Very low maintenance, and gas stations are another business that I've looked into. I mean, there are a number of things out there. They don't have restaurant businesses. Can be a lot harder than a lot of the other businesses out there. I mean, if you're looking at businesses, definitely open up your horizons. I mean, there are a number of other great sort of retail non-restaurant concepts out there that can do really well. And it's just a matter of I think a large part of it is getting the right location and building out enough of these things where they throw off enough cash where you can live the life that you want.
But keep in mind, I mean, it's one of the scale economies. The greater volumes you do in any one unit, you're just flowing that much more to the bottom line, because it takes not much more to build an Applebee's in terms of the time than it takes probably to open a new Cold Stone, right? So, but you end up doing much greater volumes at the end of the day. My advice to anyone is go for volume. Volume. The highest volume concept you can get your hand on. Seriously?
Yeah.
Notwithstanding that advice, I think I know the answer to this question if you're buying 87 stores. But if you're buying, a smaller number, a handful of stores, how dirty can you expect to get your hands in the day-to-day operations of the business? If you're buying gas stations, are you going to be spending time behind the counter in the gas station, or can you completely, hire people to take care of? Well, it may be a dumb question. I just don't have any sense of if you're scooping ice cream.
Okay, that's for me. I mean, the answer to that is pretty clear. I mean, if you're going to get into any business, you absolutely, positively need to make a commitment to rolling up your sleeves and getting into that store, right? Because, I mean, and of course I have a very different set of circumstances than my other panelists, but my philosophy around this is, well, one, it's your baby, right? So you want to make sure it gets run and taken care of the way you want it. But my philosophy around building these things is, how can you possibly hire and train people to run this thing if you yourself don't know firsthand what's the best way that these things should be managed? And so if you're looking at this purely as an investment play, then I would say I would be be cautious, because Like the chain of Applebee's that were bought up in Seattle. Those were all break-even stores. The guy was in Chicago, running it like a portfolio of investments. And you got to really make the effort to not only from day one learn. And nothing I think impresses my kids more than when I'm on in the early days of the store, I was in there, closing up the store, mopping it up, sticking my hand down the drain and pulling all this gunk out of there. And they look at that and say, if the owner of the store, an MBA from Stanford is doing that, then I should be able to do it too. And so that's the kind of example you need to set, not only among when you're first in there, but also with all the people all the managers and regional managers that you're hiring to take care of the businesses.
Well, also it's setting up your organization structure. Until you get to a certain scale, you've got a whole business. If you've got 1, 2, 3, or 4, the manager of that entity doesn't come in. Who does? I guess to some degree, gas does pump itself now. But
business just got better.
But largely, you're going to be the one showing up there if nobody else does. So you better know how to do it.
This question for Greg, I guess, and Jim also. Greg, when you bought Applebee stores in Washington, they were break even. How much of the success of that operation subsequently do you think is down to operational improvement versus the financial engineering and being able to borrow effectively, just get scale and just let it go?
That's a great question. I would say that, the operator who built all those restaurants and was running them at the time is still running them. And what I did was, look at him. He was a veteran from, the early days of Applebee's and a great guy. But he was a frustrated executive/entrepreneur reporting to someone far away who didn't understand the unique environment in Washington. I basically said to him, what I'm going to do, I don't want to run it day to day. I'm qualified. I don't know how to run a restaurant. And I want you to run it, and I'm going to interest you in running it. And I gave him an equity participation, which for him was very meaningful. And that's half the success, 3/4. It's impossible to say. At the same time, I think we hit scale. And at the same time, Applebee's introduced national advertising. The Washington market had always bought local radio. It's too expensive to buy TV up there. So when national hit TV, that helped. So all these things came together to really make it, it's better to be lucky than smart. I think we were, in many ways, just lucky. But you make your own luck. Right?
And a follow-up, including Jim, then, is you got a corporate store that was underperforming relative to potential, or at least seeing clear improvement. Do you think is that an overall strategy of getting into franchising? If you assume you're going to buy into franchising, do you try and buy, is it a good strategy to try and buy underperforming stores? Are corporate stores likely to be underperforming stores because they're just less interested in the outcome?
So I think in principle that sounds like, it doesn't sound like a bad approach, but be careful, right? Because when you look at you have to look at the financials, right, of any store that you're looking at buying. But if it's underperforming, there are multiple reasons why it could be underperforming, right? So clearly, if you can pinpoint that it's truly operational, which I didn't necessarily do, but I just knew. The incentive structure wasn't there for a corporate, manager in my store to run that as efficiently and as smartly, as a local owner operator. But there are other reasons. There are Colsons out in the system that perform poorly, not because of poor operational oversight, but because they've just picked stupid locations, right? And so, make sure you look carefully at why a store is underperforming. Look at the trade area, talk to other franchisees, and develop a sense of whether or not you should be able to improve that store. But the great thing is, if you do find an underperforming store, you'll probably find that the owner will sell that at a discount, right? Because you're basically, I tend to value these things anywhere from 3 to 5 times EBITDA, right? And so, chances are, an underperforming store, you'll be able to buy for a song, right? And be able to, flip that thing in a year for a profit if you want, or leverage that and build out more.
And just one other caveat, it can be a great approach, but if by any chance any of the folks in this room have a little bit of an ego, which never happens here, it's a very good negotiating ploy that people used on me and that I used on the people subsequently is, oh yeah, I'm stupid, I can't run it, and you just believe, yeah, I'm like 10 times better than this guy. And, and then I used the same thing when I sold mine, and, oh yeah, I don't know education. And 6 months later they came back and said, well, gosh, you sort of did everything right. I don't know what. But so, in a negotiation, it's a very easy thing to do. Yeah, you're going to be better. You're going to be the person to turn this restaurant around that's had 5 failures before me. So just be a little careful about that.
I think Jim makes a very good point about there's sort of an inherent advantage an owner-operator has because they sort of care more because the other manager was working for the man and not really caring. However, you shouldn't underestimate that there are great management structures out there that could be running it perfectly well. We've done multiple acquisitions across the country at this point. If it's taught me anything, buy the best quality you can get your hands on. Do not look for underperforming stores. Go the opposite way and pay up for the best stores. Your life will be easier, right? And just build off that success. Find a good market and then build one more in it, right? And turnarounds. You get what you pay for in life. But
We have time for a couple more questions.
On that concept, you said that the multiple, the earnings, the price of these seem very low. It seems like such an incredible opportunity to throw, invest 300 and throw out 400 a year. How come the price is so low?
I think it's because it's a restaurant business, and it suffers from the extreme risk of the industry, and it's a very limited, market of people who can arrange the capital to go into such a perceived risky enterprise. In fact, it's not that risky, and it's part of the whole arbitrage opportunity. If there's a scale of risk from 0 to 100, and 100 is risky, I think Applebee's is really close to 0, right? But the entire band of multiple is 3 to 6, right? Or doing it like that, and really it ought to be sort of 1 to 15 or something like that. But it's not. And as a buyer, you don't care. You care about the difference between that and debt, right?
Okay, one more question. Yes.
A question about dealing with franchisors. So do you have any tricky experience, either in success or failure, in terms of dealing with a franchisor, in terms of evaluating them, dealing with them before buying the franchise and after buying them?
Talk to other franchisees. That's the best way. And fly out and see them wherever they are. And did you fly out and see where are the Cold Stone people?
They're in Arizona. So, I hear different stories across different franchisors, but, I think what you'll find is exactly like Greg said, if you talk to the franchisees, you'll develop a sense of how supportive and how strong the franchisor is and how much they really care about the franchisee. I actually was awarded another ice cream franchise from a competitor, and before I got my Cold Stone, right? And so, but I talked to a number of people who had franchises for these guys, and just realized that they weren't getting the kind of support or commitment or sort of, they didn't have quite the vision that Cold Stone had, and so I passed on that. Not knowing that I would ever get a Cold Stone, but to Greg's point, I kind of singled out what I thought was sort of the highest quality, franchise, and I decided if I wasn't going to get, the highest quality ice cream, then I would go ahead and get something else.
Again, in the documents that Greg referred to, there's a listing of all the franchises nationally. So even though the corporation might give you a couple of their dog and pony franchisees, go through and call throughout the country. And people are very unshy about sharing their disappointment.
Well, talk your ear off.
Yeah. So no, call the guy, from Bangor, Maine to Miami, Florida to San Diego, and also if you think the demographics are going to be more similar, talk to somebody else in coastal California might be more applicable depending on the franchise than somebody in Des Moines. But talk to those folks, and they'll give you the scoop, so to speak.
Any last words of wisdom?
No, the only thing, I'm so close by. I've tried to be.
Come get some ice cream here.
For $1.29, we'll give you all the advice you want.
No, but I've tried to be as sort of accessible and receptive towards people in the GSB community. So if you have questions or want to talk more, feel free to drop me a line anytime.